It started with a signal, short, broken, and pulsing like a heartbeat through static. The Derven Empire, the ruling power in the eastern spiral of the galaxy, intercepted it first. Faint coordinates, no name, just a warning. One sentence burned into the encrypted data. Do not board human vessels. We do not take prisoners. Most in the Galactic Council ignored it. They assumed it was a scare tactic, some primitive warning left behind by a dying species trying to bluff its way out of extinction. After all, humans were a relatively new presence in the galaxy, technologically behind, culturally erratic, emotionally volatile. No match for the galactic titans that had ruled for eons. But then the Derven scout ship Casari disappeared. No distress call, no debris, no survivors. 3 days later, the Casari's automated emergency beacon was found drifting near a small moon. The ship itself? Gone. The logs? Wiped clean, except for one entry. A simple video, less than 20 seconds long. A dark room. A single human face lit by red emergency lights. Blood smeared across his jaw. He spoke slowly, each word deliberate. You broke the rule. We warned you. And then static. It should have been enough to raise alarms. But instead, the Dervens escalated. A fleet of 5 was dispatched. Their goal, intercept the human patrol vessel TSV Deliverance, a Class 3 destroyer that had last been spotted in the Outer Rim. Their orders, board and disable, take prisoners, extract data, prove that humans were just another species that needed taming. They never came back. By the time the Dervan High Command realized the severity of what they were facing, it was too late. Earth didn't issue a declaration of war. They didn't broadcast threats or launch political complaints. Number. The Deliverance just vanished, like a ghost slipping through starlight. And a week later, the first Derven colony on the fringe of their empire went silent. And the next. And the next. It wasn't conquest. It was surgical. Cold. Like a reaper choosing who lived and who died. One survivor, a Derven comms officer found in an escape pod half mad from what he'd seen, kept repeating the same thing. They don't take prisoners. They never take prisoners. He described firestorms from orbit, boarding pods shaped like coffins, crashing into hulls without a sound. Human soldiers, no, ghosts, with black visors and no emblems, no names, no hesitation. Every alien they encountered was either dead or left screaming behind closed doors. And it always ended the same way. The ship was gone before reinforcements could arrive. No one understood why. The humans didn't claim territory. They didn't raise flags. They didn't even send messages. They just punished. Among the galaxy's fringe colonies, a phrase started circulating like wildfire. Never board a human ship. The Derven Empire, once so sure of its dominance, had no idea what they'd awakened. Because Earth's history wasn't filled with peace treaties and soft diplomacy, it was forged in rebellion, fire, and 1,000 years of wars. Humanity didn't build ships to explore. Not anymore. They built them to hunt, and somewhere in deep space, the TSV Deliverance prepared for its next target. Space is cold. But what moved through it now was colder still, silent, unfeeling, and crafted by hands that had known nothing but war. The TSV Deliverance floated like a shadow just outside the Dervan defense grid, its matte black hull absorbing starlight. No signals, no lights, just a presence, like a held breath before a storm. Inside, Captain Rhea Morgan stood alone on the bridge, staring at the holographic display. A new target had just appeared. Derven Orbital Outpost Z19, a relay station housing hundreds of soldiers, scientists, and technicians. A soft ping echoed as the system calculated trajectories and threat probabilities. The AI had already flagged the outpost as vulnerable. Morgan didn't blink. "Mark it." "Yes, Captain," the AI responded. Its voice was eerily calm, emotionless, just the way Earth Command liked it. She pressed a button on her gauntlet. "Wake the Black Unit. Target confirmed." Across the ship, dark pods began to hum. Within each one, a soldier lay in cryo-sleep, encased in armor that fused directly to their nervous systems. The Black Unit wasn't trained. They were engineered. Their minds were wired differently, conditioned not for fear, not for mercy, but for calculated extermination. They'd all seen what happened to the first Earth colony that made contact with the Dervens. Back then, humans had extended a hand, and the Dervens had burned it. Children, civilians, diplomats. Gone in one sweep of arrogance and superiority. Earth didn't forget. Earth didn't forgive. They learned, evolved, and sent ships like the Deliverance into deep space, not to negotiate, but to erase threats. As the soldiers awakened, a low vibration filled the halls. They didn't speak. They didn't ask questions. One by one they assembled in the drop bay, their armor locking into place with magnetic clicks. They were faceless. No flags, no ranks. Just humanity's vengeance made flesh. Meanwhile, in Outpost Z19, alarms hadn't gone off yet. Technician Sarek, a low-level data analyst, was sipping spiced plasma tea, watching another boring report from the council chambers when he noticed a flicker on the scanner. A brief anomaly, like static across a screen. He tapped a few keys, but the image was already gone. He didn't even have time to warn anyone. By the time the Deliverance released its drop pods, it was already too late. They struck silently, each one embedding into the outpost's outer shell like knives into flesh. There were no explosions, no alerts, just one quiet moment, then chaos. Doors were cut open with surgical precision. The Black Unit moved through smoke and darkness, their HUDs painting every Derven in sight with red outlines. There were no negotiations, no surrender calls, just precision shots, silenced plasma rounds, and zero hesitation. Sarek barely escaped his office, running down a corridor slick with blood and scorch marks. He turned a corner and froze. 3 human soldiers stood ahead, motionless. He raised his hands. "Please, I surrender. I'm not a soldier." One of the humans turned his head slightly, as if registering the words. Then he raised his weapon. Sarek screamed. 2 hours later, the outpost was silent. The Deliverance extracted the team with 0 losses. No hostages, no survivors, just a pile of Dervan bodies and a station drifting dead in space. Captain Morgan didn't smile. She never did. But her voice was clear. "Market cleansed," the AI confirmed. Another violation answered. She turned away from the screen, her voice low. Maybe now they'll remember. But they wouldn't. The next empire, the next fleet, the next foolish admiral would eventually make the same mistake. Because they all believed humans were like them. They hadn't learned the rule, not yet. The debrief room aboard the Deliverance was barely lit, cold, and stripped of anything resembling comfort. Captain Rhea Morgan sat with her gloves still on, fingers steepled beneath her chin, as the mission playback flickered across the translucent display in front of her. Red silhouettes fell one by one, time-stamped and logged. Efficiency, 99.6%. No missed targets, no wasted movement. The operation had been flawless. She didn't look satisfied. "Casualty review," she said flatly. The AI responded. "All hostiles neutralized. No human losses. 1 trooper sustained a puncture wound. Non-fatal. No extraction delays." Morgan nodded slightly, but her eyes were distant. "The technician. The one who begged. Profile matched to Sarek Talvin. Civilian clearance, non-military, unarmed." She inhaled through her nose. "And still terminated." The AI paused, unsure whether she was asking or accusing. Correct. Morgan stood. Her boots echoed on the steel floor as she paced, jaw clenched. The rule was meant for soldiers, invaders, not janitors and tech rats. She didn't say it with pity, more like irritation, as if somewhere deep inside her, something wasn't lining up right. But she wouldn't say it out loud. Not on this ship, not in front of them, because there were no dissenters aboard the Deliverance. In the mess hall, the black unit sat in eerie silence, not out of discipline, but design. Their minds were chemically suppressed post-op, emotions dialed down, speech unnecessary. They stared at trays of gray rations without touching them. Among them sat Mason, one of the oldest members, his armor still smudged with ash. Unlike the others, he hadn't jacked out of the combat neural net completely. It left him twitching, fingers tapping the table in rhythmic bursts. He remembered faces, not names, not screams, just flashes, moments that clung to the brain like a bad dream. And one moment had stayed with him, the look on Sarek Talvin's face, the fear, the shaking voice. "I'm not a soldier." Mason knew that wasn't the kind of look you saw from a threat. It was the look of someone who knew he'd been born on the wrong planet. Still, orders were orders. No prisoners. "Next time, don't hesitate," a voice crackled across his helmet from another soldier. "That pause cost us 5 seconds of sector clearance." Mason didn't reply. He just stared down at his hands, flexing them. They didn't feel like his anymore. Back on Derven Prime, panic was brewing in the council chambers. "They struck Z19!" one minister shouted, slamming a fist onto the table. "An outpost with no strategic value. They're not fighting a war, they're sending messages." "No," the High Commander corrected coldly. "They're enforcing one." He gestured, and the room dimmed as holographic footage flickered to life. Security camera fragments, corrupted and jittering with static, showed flashes of black armored soldiers gliding through smoke-filled corridors like ghosts. One clip showed a group of Derven guards lowering their weapons, hands raised, and getting dropped anyway. The humans don't want surrender. They want certainty, fear. They want us to never forget the cost of stepping foot on their vessels. There was silence. A young councilwoman, fresh-faced and idealistic, whispered, "But they're monsters." "No," the commander said, eyes narrowed. "They're what we made them." The room went cold. That truth had become harder to ignore. Humanity had once offered peace, trade, even alliance. But when Dervan warships glassed their outer colonies just to flex dominance, it wasn't the humans who declared war. It was the humans who promised revenge. Quietly, efficiently, with no court, no trial, just a single deadly promise: don't board our ships. Back aboard the Deliverance, Rhea Morgan stood in her private quarters, staring at the only personal item she allowed herself. An old photo of her brother, Theo. He had been stationed on Nova Espera, the Earth colony that was the first to be wiped out during initial contact with the Dervens. He wasn't even a soldier, just a mechanic. She remembered how Earth Command had sent diplomats after that. Talks, apologies, pleas, and the Dervens had laughed, so Morgan volunteered for command. Not out of duty, not for medals, for Theo, for every civilian that burned while the galaxy smirked at humanity's weakness. Now, they smirked no more. Still, that technician's face wouldn't leave her mind. She reached for her helmet and sealed it over her head. "Next target?" she asked the AI. A pause. Then, Derven cruiser Veilis. Aboard is Admiral Kes Vol-Tour, confirmed participant in Nova Espera bombardment, en route to diplomatic summit. Morgan didn't hesitate. "Intercept. No survivors." The Veilis drifted through the void like a floating temple, sleek, silver, and proud. Unlike human ships, which were designed for utility and violence, Derven cruisers emphasized beauty and status. The Veilis was no different. Its outer hull shimmered with energy signatures and ceremonial markings, its interior lined with polished obsidian and ambient lighting that mimicked the warm hues of Derven suns. Inside, Admiral Kes Voltur reclined in his private lounge, sipping a delicate crimson liqueur from a crystal chalice. Around him, a live projection of the upcoming peace summit shimmered in the air, a last-ditch attempt by the Derven elite to quell the growing panic across the Empire. Every world on the fringe was whispering the same thing. The humans are coming. Kes didn't believe in fear. Not really. He had survived 5 campaigns, 2 insurgencies, and a failed coup. Humans were a bump in the road, a barbaric, emotionally unstable species that had gotten lucky with a few warships and a dramatic flair for vengeance. "They're still just animals," he muttered to himself, watching the news feed. "Eventually, all animals are brought to heel." As if on cue, the lights in his lounge flickered. Once, twice, then black. The Deliverance had already locked onto the Veilis 3 minutes earlier. It approached with no lights, no engine burn, a drifting shadow. The kind of thing most long-range scanners wouldn't even register until it was far too late. It punctured the Veilis' perimeter shield with a silent EMP burst, knocking out power and communications in seconds. Rhea Morgan stood in the deployment chamber as the black unit prepared. This time she joined them. Her armor hissed as it sealed, matte gray with a single red line down the spine, a mark worn only by captains who had chosen to fight beside their soldiers. Her face disappeared behind the visor, and with it, the last shred of her hesitation. "Objectives?" Mason asked through the neural link. "Terminate all bridge personnel. Confirm kill on Kes Voltur. Leave the ship in orbit for the Council to find." He nodded. "Confirmed. Execute." The breach was perfect. 4 pods struck the Veilis in synchronized waves, cutting clean through its elegant hull. Derven security forces scrambled in confusion, half blinded by darkness, their stun rifles useless against a threat they couldn't see. The black unit moved like death incarnate. No warnings. No quarter. In the command deck, Kes Voltur had finally grabbed his comlink, but all he could hear was static. Then boots, heavy, deliberate, echoed behind him. He turned. A human. Fully armored. Visor down. Silent. And then the Admiral realized. No guards, no alarms, no chance. He opened his mouth to beg. The soldier raised a weapon. Rhea Morgan watched it happen through the squad's live feed. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Just another ghost added to the void. The mission was complete in 7 minutes and 24 seconds. No Dervan survivors. The ship was left drifting, its hull scarred with carbon burns and blood trails. The Deliverance retreated without a trace, silent as always. The next morning, the Dervan Council received a priority distress beacon from the Veilis. They played it on the central display. The feed showed the bridge. Bodies everywhere. The Admiral's lifeless form slumped over the navigation controls. And then, as if on cue, the recording glitched. A shadow moved across the screen. A flicker. Then a human face appeared. Not helmeted, not hidden. Captain Rhea Morgan. Expression cold, voice even colder. We remember Nova Espera, and then black. Nothing else. In the council chamber, panic turned to open dread. The youngest minister stood slowly. "We have to stop this. This isn't war. This is annihilation." "They don't want our territory," the High Commander muttered, rubbing his temples. "They don't want our surrender. They want to make sure we never even think of touching their ships again. But we already made peace overtures. Too late." Outside the chamber, thousands protested, demanding answers. Inside, a much quieter fear was spreading like a virus through the highest echelons of Derven command. What if humanity didn't stop? Back aboard the Deliverance, Rhea removed her helmet in silence. She stared out at the stars, but her reflection was the only thing she saw, older, colder, and no closer to peace. "You did it," the AI said. "Volter is dead." She nodded but said nothing. "New orders?" She hesitated for the first time in a long while. "Not yet," she whispered. "Let them breathe. Let them look at his body floating in space. Let them think." The AI paused. "And when they forget again?" Morgan's eyes narrowed. "Then we remind them." The Veilis was a floating marvel of Derven engineering, its hull seamless and adorned with emblems of conquest, a ship not built for stealth or survival, but for status. It shimmered in orbit above the moon of Edrak Tau, broadcasting signals of peace as it prepared to attend the upcoming summit. Inside, nobles and military elites floated in zero-gravity chambers, their laughter loud, their arrogance louder. Admiral Kes Voltur, architect of Nova Espera's obliteration, stood at the helm. He looked out over the starlit expanse, voice smooth, confident. "Send word to the summit. The great Kes Voltur arrives in 4 rotations. Prepare the banners and the blood wine." His officers chuckled. Behind them, a young comms specialist noticed something odd on her screen. A gravitational ripple, faint and irregular, like the pull of something large moving fast without propulsion. Her eyes widened. "Admiral, there's—" She didn't finish. The lights cut out. The ship groaned, a low, predatory sound, like metal being dragged across bone. From the cold nothingness the Deliverance struck. It didn't fire, it didn't warn. Instead it landed, attached to the Veilis like a parasite, hacking its systems and pumping a tailored electromagnetic virus straight into its nervous system. Lights died, shields collapsed, airlocks seized open. Rhea Morgan watched the chaos unfold from her command seat. Her voice was sharp. "Breaching team, on me! We take the bridge!" For the first time in years, she would step foot on an enemy vessel, not for strategy, but for justice. Her unit moved without fear, silent shadows gliding through frozen hallways. Derven nobles screamed as emergency bulkheads failed, their luxury cabins exposed to vacuum and death. In 30 seconds, half the ship was compromised. Mason, moving ahead of the captain, knifed through a squad of panicked officers who barely raised their weapons. It wasn't a fight. It was a warning written in blood. On the bridge, Kes Voltur stood paralyzed. His personal guards were gone, either dead or disabled in the initial surge. All that remained was the growing sound of boots. Slow, heavy, unstoppable. He turned to flee, but the door opened before he reached it. There she was, Rhea Morgan, her armor scarred, her presence like a storm bound in steel. She stepped in, flanked by 4 silent soldiers, rifles raised. Volter backed away, voice trembling. I was invited to the summit. I am under diplomatic protection." Rhea said nothing. She raised a hand. One of her soldiers tossed something across the floor. It bounced twice, then stopped near his boots. A data pad. On it was a loop of old, grainy footage. Nova Espera. His ships firing, children running, structures collapsing in fire. He looked up. Those orders were strategic. The colony. You bombed a school first, Rhea said. His face twitched. It was to make a point. You humans needed to be... Her plasma round hit him square in the chest, cutting off the sentence. No speeches, no mercy, only silence. They left the Veilis intact, mostly. Bodies slumped in every corridor. The ship drifted without navigation. A ghost vessel. Morgan had ordered the drive disabled, but the life support left active. Let the Dervens retrieve it, let them see, Let them carry their failure back home in a gilded coffin. News of the Veilis' fate shattered Derven morale. An entire flagship. Gone. Its admiral executed. Its highborn passengers reduced to floating corpses in their ceremonial robes. No ransom, no message. Just another ship that broke the rule. In the Derven chambers, counselors argued whether to sue for full peace or prepare for retaliatory strikes. But their fleets hesitated, because retaliation meant boarding, and boarding meant war with a species that had only one rule: you don't step foot on a human ship. Back aboard the Deliverance, Rhea Morgan stood alone at her viewing port. She didn't take satisfaction in the kill. Not anymore. That part of her had died with her brother, with Nova Espera, with every peace treaty Earth had ever tried to sign in good faith. AI, she muttered, voice low. Are they getting the message? The ship answered, cold and logical. There has been no Derven approach within Earth-flagged sectors for 97 days. She nodded, then whispered, more to herself than anyone else, but it only takes one to forget. The Veilis' drifting wreckage was discovered 2 days later by a Derven scout vessel. The visuals were transmitted back to the core systems, broadcast without filter across every sector still loyal to the Empire. What they saw was not a battlefield. It was a slaughterhouse. Silent. Unchallenged. Precise. The Admiral's corpse floated, half-charred, his mouth still open as if caught mid-plea. Beside him, etched in plasma on the central bridge wall, was a simple phrase burned into the steel. This is what happens when you board a human ship. The message struck deeper than any weapon. Within hours, panic rippled through Derven military outposts. Captains began hesitating before patrols. Some even refused to enter human-adjacent space altogether. The fear wasn't of war. It was of disappearing, of being marked, boarded, and erased like the crew of the Veilis. The rule was no longer whispered. It was carved in legend. Human ships don't take prisoners. On the Deliverance, Rhea Morgan stood in the observation deck, a dark cup of synthetic coffee in her gloved hands. She wasn't resting. She hadn't really rested in years, but she was still. A storm waiting to move. Behind her, Mason approached quietly. "We got a ping," he said, voice grim. She didn't ask for details yet. Just waited. Small Derven cutter intercepted a refugee vessel. Human signatures aboard. They pulled 6 survivors from the wreck and took them prisoner, alive. Her jaw tightened. Location? Outer Rim, Casari Belt. Too far for official response. That last part was key. Official response meant diplomacy. They weren't diplomatic anymore. "Prep the team," she said. "They took prisoners. That means they broke the rule." Mason didn't smile, but his eyes hardened. "They're not going to see us coming." They never do. The Casari Belt was a graveyard of forgotten skirmishes and dying colonies. Most avoided it. Too unstable, too lawless. That's why the Dervens liked it. They could break the rules out there and think no one would notice. The cutter was docked in a decaying refueling station built into an asteroid. No alarms, no shields, no security that could stop what was coming. The Deliverance approached with its engines cold, drifting through the debris fields like a predator. It latched onto the station hull with magnetic claws, completely undetected. Inside, the Derven crew laughed around a table of confiscated Earth rations. They wore armor, but it was ceremonial, intended to intimidate, not defend. The human prisoners were locked in a storage chamber, barely conscious, IVs in their arms, their biometric data being harvested. The door to the station's main hold exploded inward with surgical force. The black unit poured through. They didn't shout, they didn't warn. They executed. One Derven officer reached for his weapon and was dropped mid-motion. Another tried to surrender, his hands raised, voice pleading in Dervenic. Rhea shot him in the throat without blinking. To take a human prisoner was not a mistake. It was an act of war. They cleared the entire station in under 4 minutes. 38 Dervan personnel. 0 survivors. Rhea stood over the station logs, scanning for data while Mason checked the prisoners. "Alive," he said. "Barely, but they'll make it." She looked at one. A girl, maybe 15. She was staring at Rhea through bleary, tear-washed eyes, not with fear, but with a strange kind of awe. "You came?" the girl whispered. "They said no one would." Rhea crouched down slowly, removed her helmet. Her hair clung to her skin, matted with sweat. Her eyes, tired but still burning. "We always come," she said. The girl reached out, touching the sigil on Rhea's chest plate. "Why?" Rhea didn't answer right away. She stood, looking back toward the silent carnage they left behind. "Because once, no one came for us." In the next Derven war room, the reports came in faster than they could be buried. Another station gone. Another crew erased. Human prisoners recovered. All Dervan lives lost. But this time, there was no video message, no spoken threat, just one thing carved into the station's inner wall, same as before. "This is your second warning." A chilling realization dawned on the War Council. Humans weren't just fighting anymore. They were enforcing, policing a single brutal law in the dark corners of space. A law born from trauma and carried by wrath. One commander stood up, trembling. "How many warnings do we get?" No one answered, because deep down they already knew. There wouldn't be a third. Word of the Casari incident spread faster than official channels could contain it. Refugees whispered it first, then smugglers, then Outer Rim miners who'd seen the aftermath with their own eyes. The message was always the same. The humans are watching. They never forget. They never forgive. The Derven Empire scrambled to regain control of the narrative. They issued statements calling the Deliverance a rogue element, disavowed the actions at Nova Espera, and pledged deep regret for the breakdown in diplomacy. But it was too late. The fear was in their bones now. No amount of press conferences could scrub the sight of the Veilis or the Casari refueling station from their minds. These weren't just stories anymore. They were warnings, passed from captain to captain like contraband. And somewhere in the black, Rhea Morgan watched them all. The Deliverance drifted above a barren moon now, hidden behind its magnetic storms. Inside, Rhea sat across from the girl they had rescued. Her name was Kyla, her cheeks still hollow, skin still pale from starvation, but the strength in her eyes was returning. Rhea passed her a nutrient bar. "You need to eat more." Kayla took it, nodded, then paused. "Do you always come for people like me?" "Not always in time," Rhea said, "but when we hear, we don't ask questions." Kayla looked down, ashamed. "They didn't even want anything from us. We were just human," Rhea said, cutting her off. "That's all it takes." Kayla blinked. "Why do they hate us so much?" Rhea leaned back, eyes fixed on the metal ceiling above them. "Because we're hard to kill," she murmured, "because we don't forget who drew first blood, and because once we tried to make peace, and they taught us that mercy was weakness." Later that day, a new signal came in. Encrypted, human-flagged, but not military. Civilian colony, Bastion's Hollow, an unarmed settlement on the border of Derven-patrolled space. Population 3,000. Their message was brief and trembling. "Derven scout ships spotted. They scanned our power grid, our shields. They didn't answer our hails. We don't think it's a coincidence." They weren't asking for help. They were saying goodbye. Rhea stood at the center of the command deck, fingers clenched into fists. "We're not letting another Nova Espera happen." Mason turned toward her. "It's not a military target. There's no tactical gain." "I don't give a damn about tactics," she said. "If they're probing colonies again, they're testing our threshold, seeing how far they can go before we stop responding." She walked over to the map projection and pointed. "Then we show them the threshold is 0. We move now." The Deliverance jumped into Bastion's orbit 6 hours later. Quiet. Watchful. At first the colony was stunned, then grateful. Their people lined rooftops, cheering silently through visors and windows. But Rhea didn't respond to the crowd. She looked toward the edge of the system. There, blinking faintly, was a Derven recon vessel. No weapons, just a long-range probe ship designed for intelligence gathering. It was staying just outside missile range, testing them. Rhea nodded to Mason. "Send them a message." He tapped into the frequency and waited. Rhea spoke clearly. "You've entered proximity space of a protected human colony. Leave now or be boarded." Silence, then laughter. The Dervan captain's voice was smug. "You wouldn't attack a diplomatic scout vessel. That would be an escalation." Rhea's face didn't move. "You escalated when you scanned civilian shield frequencies." He kept pushing. "We have rights under Galactic Treaty 4019. She cut the channel. "Board it," she said. "Now." The Deliverance hit the scout ship like a thunderbolt. It disabled engines, cracked open the hull with a boarding spike, and poured Marines inside like floodwater. Within 3 minutes, the Derven crew was neutralized. There were no survivors, no ransom, no explanation. When the Derven Empire demanded answers, Earth's response was a 3-word transmission. They broke rule. It was official now, a doctrine, not just a legend. Human ships don't take prisoners. Human colonies aren't touched. And anyone who violates that law won't live to explain why. The silence that followed Bastion's hollow wasn't peace. It was fear. Across the galactic map, Derven scout ships began quietly withdrawing from human borders. Patrols pulled back. Derven merchants canceled trade runs. Even black market slavers, once bold enough to hover near Earth colonies under the false protection of gray zone treaties, disappeared. But fear doesn't always breed obedience. Sometimes it mutates into something far worse. In the depths of the Derven Empire, voices began to rise. Old voices, the kind that believed in domination, not diplomacy. These weren't generals or politicians. They were warlords, wounded aristocrats whose fleets had shrunk since the treaty, whose power had waned under peace. And now they saw an opportunity. "They're just humans," hissed Lord Koresh Vor, leader of the shattered Third Derven Armada. "We used to farm their colonies for resources. Now we hide from them like children scared of ghosts." Another voice added, "They enforce this rule like a religion. No judge, no trial, only death." "They think they are gods," Vor growled. "Let's remind them they bleed like the rest of us." It wasn't an official declaration. It was worse. It was unofficial rebellion, and those were the hardest to predict. Back on the Deliverance, the crew intercepted a chilling message. It hadn't been meant for them. It was leaked from a hacked Dervan communication node. A name they hadn't heard in a while resurfaced. Koresh Vor. Rhea stood over the decrypted feed, her expression hardening with every word. "Not an empire anymore. It's a graveyard of fear. But we will walk on human skulls before we kneel again." Mason frowned. "We lost half our colony war dead to that butcher. Didn't think he had the guts to come back." "He doesn't," Rhea muttered. "But maybe he doesn't care anymore." The message ended with coordinates. A fringe colony. Small. No defenses. Vor was hunting again. When they arrived at Delphara 7, the sky was already bleeding. Smoke rose in black plumes from the valley, structures in ruin, civilian comms silent. The Deliverance had entered too late for prevention, but not too late for punishment. Ria's voice cracked through the comms. "No survivors on the ground. Scans show Derven carriers still in orbit. It's him." She stared at the main vessel, a bloated, archaic war barge known as the Dreadfire. An old beast, scarred from battles long past, its hull patched with stolen tech. "Then we do it loud," Mason said. But Ria shook her head. We do it like they did it to us. Slowly, personally. The Deliverance didn't attack from orbit. It docked, right on top of the Dreadfire's forward hull. The Dervens didn't even have time to react. One moment they were celebrating their victory, laughing, drunk on conquest. Then the hull screamed, and the oxygen started bleeding out. Ria led the assault herself. Every step she took through the Dreadfire's corridors was a step through history. This was the ship that had burned her cousin's mining colony, that had enslaved half of Earth's second-wave settlers before the war. This ship was personal. She moved without hesitation. Her team executed targets with precision. Engine core sabotage, weapons disabled, key personnel marked and eliminated. No warnings, no speeches. They reached the command bridge in under 5 minutes. Koresh Vor stood there waiting, in ceremonial battle armor too ornate to be functional. He smiled when he saw Ria. "I was hoping it'd be you," he said. "Do it then. Make me a martyr." But Ria didn't lift her gun. Instead, she tossed a small device at his feet, a projector that came to life with a flickering blue image. It showed Delphara 7. Not what it looked like now, but before. Children running through fields, families trading in open-air markets, laughing. Then it cut to the aftermath, the bodies, the ruin. Ria looked him in the eye. "You're not dying a martyr. You're dying a memory." She walked out. Mason stayed behind. One shot echoed through the hall. Back in orbit, the Deliverance ejected the wreck of the Dreadfire, engines disabled, drifting, just like the Veilis before it. But this time, the human ship didn't etch a message into the hull. This time, the message came in audio. Looped, broadcast across every Derven frequency. "We saw what you did to Delphara. We remember Nova Espera. You were warned once, then twice. This is no longer a warning. This is the rule now." Space fell quiet after Delphara 7, not because the war was over, but because it had changed. The Dervan Empire, once confident in its machines, its treaties, its history of subjugation, was unraveling under the pressure of something it had never truly understood: human rage with memory. No headlines, no heroic parades, just a string of ships left floating in the dark, each one a tomb, each one a sermon. On the outer rim, smugglers stopped running human cargo. Too dangerous. You didn't just risk legal trouble, you risked never being seen again. Independent worlds posted makeshift banners on their spaceports that read, "No prisoners here, humans welcome." But Earth said nothing. The Terran Accord remained officially silent. They didn't deny the Deliverance existed. They just never acknowledged it either, because they didn't need to. Ria stood alone in the ship's observation deck, watching a small blue planet spin slowly below. It wasn't Earth, just another border colony that had requested a silent patrol sweep. Standard now, whenever a Derven fleet was reported in a neighboring system. She didn't mind the quiet. She'd learned to live in it, move in it, kill in it. Kayla entered quietly behind her. The girl no longer looked fragile. She wore lightweight recon armor now. Standard issue. Not because she was a soldier, but because she insisted on helping. She'd mapped 3 Derven outposts for the Black Unit already. Ria didn't turn around, but she felt her presence. "You should be sleeping." Kyla stepped beside her, crossing her arms. "I had a dream." "About Delphara?" "No," she said. "About Earth. About what it must have been like before all of this. Before the war. When the rule wasn't a rule yet." Ria sighed, her voice lower now. It wasn't peace. It was just waiting. Waiting for someone to betray the silence. Kayla looked up at her. And when it happened, we didn't make laws, we made examples. That's the only language they understand out here. There was a pause. Then Kayla asked softly, "Does it ever get easier?" Rhea turned to her. "What?" "Knowing that you're not here to save people anymore, that you're just here to make others afraid of trying." Rhea stared at her long and hard, not angry, just honest. That is saving them. News reached them from high command, unofficial, as usual. A new Derven faction had declared independence from the Empire. They called themselves the Compliant. Their first order of business was signing a non-aggression pact with human space, unsolicited, unnegotiated, just signed and transmitted. The Empire didn't denounce them, because the Empire was bleeding, not from bombs or invasions, but from disobedience born of terror. Each time a Derven captain made the decision to withdraw rather than engage, the rule was reinforced. Each time a Derven colony posted that no humans would be detained, it grew. It wasn't a legend anymore, it was doctrine. In time, a plaque was installed on Earth's orbital defense ring. No names, no ceremony, just a sentence in 37 languages. No matter where you go, no matter what you think, if you harm a human and live to boast, you didn't do it near one of our ships. And beneath that, human ships don't take prisoners. Years later, in a Dervan academy deep in the core systems, a professor whispered to his class, "There was once a time when we ruled the edge of the galaxy." He paused. "But then we boarded a ship called the Deliverance, and history stopped being written by the powerful." A student raised her hand. "Is the rule still enforced?" The professor leaned closer and answered quietly, "Only if you're foolish enough to test it."